Okay. Hi, everyone. And as always, welcome to Daytona Office Hours, where we take a look at the past releases from last week and take a look at what's coming up with Daytona. And of course, with an open floor for questions and any discussions about the repo itself or Daytona in general. So I'll just share my screen really quickly. And maybe zoom in a bit. Yeah. Okay, so since last Wednesday, the office hours were held by Ivan, if I'm not mistaken. We released a couple of minor and a couple of patch releases as well. So starting off with 0.29.0, it only had one single feature, which was add a start prompt in Daytona code for stop projects. So just a small UX improvement that allows you to just use Daytona code and start stopped workspaces without having to start them first. Then a few fixes regarding Bitbucket. I think there are two of them here. Then a few fixes regarding the binary download. Then actually accessing workspaces through SSH. So before this fix made by Luca, our SSH connection would actually fail because we use a separate file from your SSH config and then just include that file in your SSH config. And if the include line is not on top of the file, it would actually fail to, let's say, include the actual Daytona config. So we just changed up the logic to always move the include line on top of the file. Then we have a removal of some obsolete flags from the create command and remove duplicate image pulling on project create. So this is just a small, let's say, small optimization for creating projects from non-dev container configurations where we would pull the same image 2 times during the process, and now we just pull it 1 time, so it's a bit faster. Then we have fetch branches with correct options from Bitbucket. Again, that's the Bitbucket fix, and then a timeout to get workspace info from provider. So in the event where, for example, a remote workspace is disconnected from your Tailscale, or you stop it manually, not through Daytona, you couldn't actually remove it because we were getting all of the information from the provider, which would then hang forever or actually exit completely. So we just added timeout for this, and this also affects the workspace list as well. Then a small telemetry update made by me. So now commands that open your project in an ID actually track the ID inside our telemetry data. And this also applies to when you change up the default ID with Daytona IDE. This, as with all of our telemetry, doesn't include any personally identifiable information. It just is the IDE ID and nothing else. Then a few provider updates. So the speed up of the duplicate image pulling, I think this is it. Yeah, so it includes all existing providers. So users that haven't updated their providers can do so with Daytona provider update. And you can also pass the all flag to automatically update all of them. Okay, that's done with 0.29.0. We also had a patch to that release. So a few small fixes that were influencing some of our users. So for example, handle and log missing project config on repository creation. This was actually by one of our newest contributor, Brian's Go. So the problem was that when you try to create a workspace from a repository that doesn't have a project config, it would actually log a failure in the API server, which is kind of, let's say, not pretty to look at. So we just remove the error logging in that case, and now the flow is actually exactly the same. It's just a bit cleaner log on your API server. Then you have multi-workspace select marking. So I think Tarun noticed that. So the actual selection UI we used for deleting workspaces was reused for all other selection processes. So when when you actually press X in a selection view, it would say that it's marked for deletion, even though you're not even in the delete form. So we just made a fix for that, and also another fix for actually only fetching verbose workspace information when you need them. So for example, when you want to open a workspace, you need verbose information, which includes also, for example, which extensions you need to install, and that's fetched from the provider. But for example, when you delete the workspace, you don't care about all that info. You just want to delete the workspace. So we just added a fix for that as well. Also, we patched some starting, stopping, and destroying workflows in DigitalOcean provider, so users can update that as well to version 0.15. That's it for this patch release. Again, it was released 2 days ago, so that's Monday. And then on Tuesday, we also had a release, our, let's say, regular release, scheduled release, which is 0.30. This included a couple of features, most notably the addition of Jupyter Notebook as an ID option. So now users can use Daytona ID and select Jupyter as as their default ID, or pass it as an ID flag. And what Daytona will do in the backend is it will actually install Jupyter and any required dependencies inside your project, start the Jupyter server, and then forward the port locally and open it automatically in your browser. So really quickly you can get set up with Jupyter using just Daytona code or Daytona create, and pass the Jupyter as an ID option. Also, big improvement to the creation flow of remote workspaces was also made by me. So previously, all remote projects and workspaces would actually download the Daytona binary from the Daytona server, which would become a bottleneck, because that means the creation process actually depends on users' upload internet speed. And now we actually swapped it out. So it will first attempt to download Daytona from our storage. And then if that fails, it will fall back to downloading it from the server. And this way, it doesn't, the creation process doesn't actually depend on your upload speed, which presents a significant improvement in the overall creation process and creation speed. And we also saw, let's say, an upward of 50% increased speeds in AWS provider workspaces, and more than 25% for DigitalOcean as well. And as you can see here in the provider updates, this does influence remote workspaces, but none of the providers need to be updated. All the changes are actually applied to the Daytona server itself. Then we also added support for Bitbucket Webhook events. This means that now we actually support pre-builds on Bitbucket repositories as well. This was done by one of our newest contributors, Unsuman, and also I forgot to mention that the Jupyter edition is done by a new contributor called One Dikachi David. I hope I didn't butcher that too much. And that's all the features for 0.30. Then a few fixes, so detecting correct user when opening JetBrains IDs. So one user on the Daytona community Slack noticed that if you don't use the Daytona user inside the project, it will actually fail to open JetBrains IDs, because we had a small bug with hard coding the path, and now it will actually correctly open the JetBrains ID no matter which user is used. Then again, a fix for some Bitbucket stuff. Bitbucket actually fetching repo PRs, and also a fix to all screens by Ida Gelic. So this is just a small fix specifically for the Daytona server configure form and Daytona target set, because you might have noticed that, for example, for some provider targets which are, say, a bit longer and a bit bigger than the rest of our screens, it would maybe sometimes fall out of bounds, and this just fixes that issue. And also, we have a new contributor that updated our charm dependency, So this might seem like a small chore, but it's actually a very big effort, because a lot of breaking changes were introduced in 0.30. And we will, of course, continue to monitor updates on charm and try to gradually update, because a lot of our, let's say, UI is terminal UI, actually all of it. So we need to be very careful with upgrading these dependencies. Also, one breaking change, which doesn't even need any, let's say, intervention from the user, is that we changed the auto start flag in code and start to just yes. So now If you pass the yes flag, it will automatically confirm all the prompts. You don't have to do anything in the meantime. So that was 0.30, and today we actually just released one patch that fixed the code install extension on create. So this was actually a regression introduced a few releases ago. So now when you pass the code flag in Daytona create, it will actually correctly install ID extensions as well. This was an error that was bugging Nico for a while, and now we finally fixed it. So that's all of the let's say past releases that we had in the past week. There was quite a few of them, and now let's check out what we have coming up in the next few releases. So as you can see here, we had one commit in the meantime from the release today, and it's support for JetBrains Fleet ID. So coming Friday, we will support the JetBrains Fleet ID, which is an ID, let's say, quote unquote, similar to VS Code. Now with Daytona, you can actually choose a fleet, and it doesn't even have to go through JetBrains Gateway. It just automatically opens if you have it installed. We also implemented warning if the user doesn't have it installed on their system. And basically, it just takes you, as with all IDs, you can pass it with the IDE flag or configure it defaultly with Daytona IDE. So that's all from the commits from today. Let's check out some of the open PRs that we hope to get done by Friday. I believe that this spinner to workspace start, stop, and delete will be ready for Friday. So this is just, again, a UI candy for it's basically just a spinner for these long-running processes that are especially, let's say, annoying when you work with other providers with remote workspaces. So it will just spin up the spinner in the terminal while you wait for these processes to complete. Then also we have support for a number of unpushed commits. Hopefully our external contributor will get this done by Friday. This is actually a welcome change because it will then display the number of unpushed commits when you list workspace info. So you are aware that, for example, if you have some unpushed commits in a workspace, you can check out the info and see that you do, and then go inside and push it before, let's say, removing the workspace or stopping it or things like that. Excuse me. Also, we have a PR filter program, Daytona Create TUI. So this is just another, let's say, UI candy that will inform the user about the steps it's taking in the Daytona creation process, because as we all know, the Daytona creation process is the, let's say, most complicated flow in Daytona itself. And now it will just add a few labels that will help you, let's say, stay on course while traversing the form. And also this PR that's actually glowing for me here is multi-profile support for Git providers. So this is actually a very big effort by our contributor, John Wick. It's a really big PR that will introduce support for having multiple Git providers of the same Git provider inside Daytona. So for example, if you have one GitHub profile that's your personal profile, you can add it. And then if you have another that's your company profile, you can add that as well. And then depending on which repo you actually use to create a workspace, it will use the appropriate Git provider, the same as with all of the other providers. We are still working on reviewing it. We actually reviewed most of it, and then we are waiting for John Wick to implement the changes, and hopefully we could get that closed this Friday. If not, I'm sure we will have it next week. Regarding the open issues, we have some of the, let's say, more interesting issues. Nico actually requested an enhancement for Daytona Restart. This is actually a very welcome change that we will definitely implement. So you can just do Daytona Restart instead of Daytona Stop and Start. Actually a very useful thing right here. And also a very important thing is to enable viewing of post-attach commands in Daytona, but not only post-attach commands. This is something that we're eyeing on implementing for a while now, and that's actually allowing the user to view logs of the creation process inside the workspace itself. So for example, that would include all the dev container lifecycle commands and such, and it would basically give you more insights into what was running and what's running inside the workspace itself. I wouldn't go too much into all of this here. We can glance at the roadmap maybe. So one issue that we added to the roadmap from our from one of our, let's say, not from our team, but from external contributors and users, is support for Kubernetes. So essentially this will be the, let's say, starting point issue for creating the Kubernetes provider, which we will draft and draw out hopefully soon, and that's added to our roadmap. As you can see, the roadmap is progressing nicely. We still have some issues that are to do. We have some of them that are in progress. But still, for example, what do we have in to do? One of the, let's say, important features is .file support. That's still on to do, and also a couple of IDE support that we're missing. And we hope that this will get going as soon as possible, because we know we are working hard on getting all of this done. So I've been rambling for about 15 minutes. Does anyone have any questions? As always, you can ask them on the recording. If not, you can ask them in chat. You can ask them in Slack. That's all fine. And if not, I can stop the recording and then hold off for questions as well. If that's all, as always, this will be on YouTube. And one note before we end, starting next week, we will probably shift Daytona office hours from Meet to Zoom, but we will confirm that on all our channels on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Slack. I see that Fabo is not excited for Zoom. But yeah, so if we decide to move from Meet to Zoom, you will get the notice, and we will update all the events in the calendar as well with the appropriate link. So that's basically it from the Daytona office hours this week. Thanks for joining, and see you again next week. Let me stop the recording.